Hi, and welcome to Lesson 21 of Algebra 1, Distance Learning Week 7. This is the third lesson in Week 7. If you have Ms. Boatwright, Ms. Reynolds, Mr. McCrae, Mr. Strickland, Mr. Still, or Mr. Yates in algebra, this is the right place to be. Remember, you can stop this video at any time. You can rewind it. You can fast forward it. And when you get to the end, it's the joke of the day. Today's learning target is I can solve equations with fractions and proportions. Solving equations with fractions. Fractions. Who likes fractions? Everybody? Anybody? Nobody. Some folks do, I guess, but most folks, nah, they don't really like fractions. So, a fractions is basically a division problem. When you see 1/3, you should see 1 divided by 3. And the opposite of division, or dividing, is multiplying. And you can get rid of a fraction by multiplying it by the denominator, which is the bottom number on a fraction. So, for instance, 1/3, 3 would be the denominator. You have to make sure you multiply every term. And if there are two fractions, you multiply by each denominator. So let's take a look at this first one. It says 1/3 x plus 4 equals 10. Well, before you start multiplying your fractions or what have you want to get your x's and your numbers on different sides of the equal sign, just like you're solving anything. And multiplying by the denominator is the last step you want to do, or next to last step. So when I look at 1/3 x plus 4 equals 10, I want to move this 4, get rid of it. So I just have x's on the left-hand side. And to do that, I do the opposite of positive 4, which you know is negative 4. Whatever I do to one side of the equal sign is fine, as long as I do it to the other side. This cancels out, and I bring down my 1/3 x, and it equals 10 minus 4, which is 6. Now, I'm going to multiply this by 3 because the denominator is 3. So I'm going to multiply this by 3. Well, if I do that, remember, I have to do the other side too. 3 times 3, well, 3 times 1 is 3. Basically what's happening here, if we're going to multiply fractions out properly, it's 3 over 1 times 1 over 3, which equals 3 over 3x. 3 times 6, it's much simpler, it's 18. 3 over 3 is 1, x equals 18. For number 2, it's got 2 x's, so it's a little bit different. So I'm still trying to get my x's on one side and my numbers on the other before I multiply. There's a couple different ways to do it. What I'm just going to do here is I'm going to subtract 2/5 x from this side so that these cancel, which of course I can't do unless I do the same thing over here. I'm going to bring this down. I get negative 3 equals 1x minus 2/5 x equals 3 over 5x, right? If you said right, you're correct. Now, I'm going to multiply each side by 5. 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. 5 times 3/5 leaves us with 3x. Now, we divide by 3, and we get negative 5 equals x. If you plug that negative 5 back into the equation, you'll see that that's the correct answer. All right. Any guesses as what to do with this next one? Well, we've got 1/2 x and 1/3 x. We have to turn those into terms that we both that we can add together. I can't add 1/2 and 1/3 without having the same denominator. So 1/2 is the same as, if I multiplied this one by 3, 3 over 6x. And if I multiplied this one by 2, I would get 2 over 6x equals 5. 3 plus 2 is 5 over 6x equals 5. Multiply by 6, because that's the denominator. 6 on this side, 6 on this side. These cancel. I get 5x equals 30. I divide both sides by the number in front of the variable, and I get x equals 6. Plug that 6 in, and you will see that that is the correct answer. Fractions. We got to put up with them, but they're relatively easy once you get your handle on them. All right. Proportions. Proportions are kind of fun, and unlike a lot of math, you're going to use proportions in other parts of your life. Chemistry, cooking, even gardening, stuff like that. A proportion is two fractions that are equal to one another. And to solve it, all you do is you cross multiply and then solve. If you got a plus or a minus, you need to add the parentheses before you cross multiply so you can do distribution and use your other equation solving strategies. Let's just take a look at 1. I have 3 over x equals 12 divided by 8. To solve this, I cross multiply, which means I multiply x times 12. That's going to be 12x, right? And I multiply 3 times 8, which is what? Yeah, 3 times 8 is 24. Now I use my solving strategies, correct? I got 12x equals 24. I'm in good shape. I got my x's on one side. I got my numbers on the other. I just need to divide by the number in front of x. And of course, whatever I do to one side of the equal sign, I always have to do to the other. 24 divided by 12 is 2. X equals 2. Simple enough, right? See if you can do this next one. 2x over 5 equals 6 over 3. Remember, you're going to multiply, cross multiply here and here. Turn off the video, see if you can solve it, and then turn it back on and see if I did it right. Did you stop the video and solve it? I hope you did. Let's take a look at this first one. 2x times 3 is what? It's 6x, right? And 5 times 6 is what? You said 30, you are correct. Again, we're in a good spot here. We got all our x's on one side. We got all our numbers on the other. So all I need to do is remember that I don't want to know what 6x equals to. I want to know what 1x equals. So I divide each side by the number in front of the variable. In this case, it's 6. X equals 5. Let's take a look at this next one. We've got some tricky ones going on here. We have two pluses, x plus 4, and we have x minus 5. Remember, we have to put those in parentheses. So when we cross multiply, what we would get is 3 times x minus 5 times 4 times x plus 4. I have to distribute. The 3 goes times the x, and it goes times the negative 5. The 4 goes times the x and times the 4. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 4 is 16. Are you with me so far? All right. Now, I have got to I could subtract 3x from each side, like so, and I would get negative 15 equals x plus 16, which means I got to get rid of the 16. Minus 16, I get negative 31 equals x. Plug that negative 31 into that upper problem, you'll see that you have the right answer. Different kinds of proportions is something like this. Same basic strategies. Why don't you see if you can solve them? I'll stop the video here and I'll start it again as soon as you can, as soon as you have an answer. So, hopefully what you got here is cross multiplying x times 3x, 3x squared. 6 times 8. Anybody know that one? 48. We have to divide by the number in front of the x squared before we get the square root. Remember, that's always the last thing we do. We get x squared equals 48 divided by 3, 16. Now we can do our patented square root of each side, move, and we get x equals, what's the square root of 16? If you said 4, you're only half right. It's plus or minus 4. How about this next one? 2x times 4 and x minus 6 times 3. So 2x times 4 is 8x. 3 times x minus 6, we have to multiply that out. This term times the x, this term times the negative 6. We get 8x equals 3x minus 18. We subtract 3x from each side, and we get 5x equals negative 18. Divide by the number in front of x. X equals 18 divided by negative 18 divided by 5 would be negative 3.6. All right, here's our summary. To eliminate a fraction, you multiply by what? What do they call that number on the bottom? They call it the denominator. And to solve a proportion, what do? You cross multiply. What next? Well, you can log into Quizizz.com. If you haven't done that yet, you can practice worksheet 21 or do Google Homework 21. You can take the week 7 quiz. Remember, you have to do 3 assignments. Here is the joke of the day. A dad said to his son, "Can I see your report card, son?" And his son replied, "I don't have it." Dad said, "Why?" And the son said, "I gave it to my friend. He wanted to scare his parents." That's all for today. We'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.